Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. So, I'm quickly wanting to bring forth for you Bhavat Bhavam 2, because I found some higher aspects of the Bhavat Bhavam that we really need to know and understand. Because we are talking about the higher self, we will talk in this one about higher self in terms of gain, in terms of loss, in terms of effort, and in terms of fruits of labor. Because much of the misunderstanding that is going around out there is interpreting the Jyotish Shastra or the Vedic Astrology in terms of gains and losses all the time. What did I gain in this world? What did I lose in this world? It may be health, wealth, anything you take. So interpretation is commonly done in terms of gain and in terms of loss. There are houses of loss, there are houses of gains. And there is a house of wisdom, there is a house of learning, there is a house of work. All of these things are there in my previous videos. But in this Bhavat Bhavam 2, we are going to see that examine a higher concept, because we are talking about the higher self. How does the house itself evolve for a person over a period of time? In terms of gain, in terms of loss, in terms of effort, in terms of fruits of labor. So again, to recap, what is Bhavat Bhavam of a house? As I put it, it's the higher self of the house. That means the evolution of the personal self towards the higher self, which happens with time. Time is the instrument through which everybody is evolving. Just look at it that way. The Bhavat Bhavam is how houses and all aspects of a house itself graduate over time. That means if it's the first house, the self becomes the higher self. If it's the second house, the wealth becomes wealth of the soul, not of the material world. So refining our sense of what is really gained, quote unquote gained, and what are expenses and what is loss or lost in the process. We are going to go for that now. The Bhavat Bhavam therefore becomes the higher self-directed learning, which has to be a conscious learning. This is crucial for you to understand. It's not going to come unconsciously if you go on living life without knowing such science. That's why I'm putting all this out there. You have to know it and you have to learn it and implement it consciously in your life. It has to be a conscious learning, a conscious effort. The human will has to be doing it consciously. Otherwise, what tends to happen is you will be drifting through life only guided by karma. Anyway, there is evolution. Anyway, you will be going through the entire life from birth to death. Anyway, you will be going through partnerships, losses, gains and everything through dashas, mahadashas, nakshatras, what have you. But what happens is, you will be just dragged around as if being dragged around by karma everywhere. As if there's a noose around your neck and your karma is pulling you all over the place. So every situation becomes a strange thing. Everywhere you go, you think, oh, I have to deal with this shit, that shit, and all kinds of shit. Instead of that, you might be going through life by thinking in terms of acting consciously. Conscious learning. That's why I made it capitals. Okay, let's jump into the first one. The Bhavat Bhavam of the first house is the first house itself. This loop over here. Which means what we are measuring again everything with respect to time. The self is always evolving throughout life, right from birth to death. It is constantly changing, ever shifting, ever evolving with respect to itself. The Bhavat Bhavam of the first house is the first house. Another one which affects the first house is the seventh house. Seventh place from the seventh house is the first house. This is spouse. Everything that a spouse provides a person affects the self. As a reflection of itself. The self reflects upon itself. The spouse affects self as the reflection and self-worth. This is very important because self-worth is very important for an individual, what they accomplish in life. It's why the old saying, a wife can make or break a husband. So, or in modern terms, I would just call it spouse. Let it be husband, wife, it doesn't matter. So spouse becomes a determinant for self and self-worth in all ways. In all ways. It's not just one way. It's all possible ways. The self is dictated by the spouse as well as the person himself or herself. Now we come to the second one, the third house. Now I wanted to get two terms. Upachya means something, the house that grows with time. as in it becomes better and better and better and grows with time. That's what's called Upachya house. The Apoklima house is also called the house of expenses. Remember, we are talking now Bhavat Bhavam in terms of gains and losses, effort and fruits of labors. That's why it's very crucial to understand this. Okay, so the second house, the Bhavat Bhavam of the second house becomes the third house. The third house being the house of skills. I call it skills because it stands for even the hands. What you accomplish with your two hands in this world is the skill. Skills cultivated. So whatever the second house, the house of wealth, Bhavat Bhavam, graduates into the third house. So does the eighth house, as we saw in the first one. The eighth house, the eighth place from the eighth house becomes the second house, the third house. What does this mean? The gains and losses, because second house is the house of gains, eighth house is the loss of gains. Stability and instability. Why? Because second house is the house of stability, eighth house is the house of instability. But both of these belong to the material realm. So of materialism, gains and losses, stability, instability of materialism contributes to the growth in skill sets through life. So your skill sets through life, because this is Upachya house, it grows with time. So throughout life you are going to keep changing this, your skill set. Don't think your skill set is something just what you got education, got a degree and now you are practicing. You have to change this and it evolves over a period of time. And this is what is called as expenses. What does expenses mean in terms of skills? You are expending your skills in this world. Everybody is expending some energy in this world. That's the expense we are talking about. That's the higher self of expenses. Your energy, your money, your effort is all the expenses going down through your skills. Moving on to the next one, the fifth house, the house of creativity, romance, love, education. Now, the third house, Bhavat Bhavam of the third house is the fifth house, the third place from itself. Same way, the ninth position from the ninth house also becomes the fifth house. So both the energies of this house are fed back into the fifth house. Now the ninth house is also termed as apoklima or expenses. The third house is also expenses. But now in the previous one we saw this becomes gains and losses and stability, instability of materialism. So what does fifth house stand for? Panapara. Panapara is the gain, wealth. The wealth that you inherently receive in the world. Now we can summarize therefore that the skills gained through time and wisdom, gained through the expenditure of energy and wisdom, is the true wealth as gifted through your children and creativity in the world. Let's go through that once again. The skills gained through time. Why? Because these are Upachya houses. So it will come only through time. These are not instant results, not a lottery ticket. The skills gained through time, wisdom, gained through expenditure of energy. And expenditure of energy happens in the third house. Wisdom happens in the ninth house. Is the true wealth which you will gift through your children to the next generation and through your own creativity. Because fifth house is both for children and for creativity. Right? Beautiful, isn't it? Then we come to the seventh house. The one that contributes to others. This is not the first house, seventh house as seen for spouse. Seventh house also stands for everybody else, you with the rest of the world. Now how is this affected in the seventh place? The 10th position, the Bhavat Bhavam of 10th house, which is 10th place from itself, becomes the 7th house. Also the Bhavat Bhavam of the 4th house, 4th place from itself, also becomes the 7th. Now 4th house is also called the Kendra house. Kendra means the foundation. The foundational houses. The first, 4th, 7th and 10th are called all the Kendra houses. That's the foundational pillars of your existence in the world. These 4 houses dictate who you are or what you feel about life. So 4th house being of home, 10th house being of career, and 10th house is also an Upachya house which grows with time. Your career grows with time. Your sense of presence in the external world as people see you will grow with time. So I summarize this as your success in career and recognition in the world, 10th house. And foundation of your home, 4th house, dictates how you treat others, the world at large. You might have seen people with bad careers or a bad house situation will not be treating others with a lot of respect. You might have bosses like this. You might have people in your life like this. You might have friends like this. They have one of these two disturbed. Therefore, they have a very poor view of the rest of the world. Next one, the 9th house. The 9th house is also called house of expenses. Here again we talk of expenses in wisdom. What do you give out as wisdom? Wisdom is not for you. Wisdom is for giving out to the rest of the world. Okay, how does the Bhavat Bhavam work? The 11th position from the 11th house looks at 9th house. The 5th position from the 5th house also looks at the 9th house. So 11th house and 5th house, both of which stands for wealth, are feeding the house of expenses. We saw in the 5th house, what is it? Skills gained through time and wisdom by expenditure of energy. Wisdom, which is the true wealth, is gifted to children and creativities. Let's put this as creativity for now, because creativity is true wealth for you. Children is your wealth to the rest of the world. So your wealth of creativity feeds the wisdom, and so does the 11th house, which is also the house of gains. It also grows with time. It's an Upachya house. And it's wealth, social circles, friends, your social networks, social media. All of this grows with time, and that also feeds into it. So what your contact with the world and your creativity becomes the feeding energy to the 9th house. Which meaning what? Expenditure of all wealth, gains, community, social network, friends, children, creativity gives wisdom through life, which you will be expending to the rest of the world. It becomes your expense. The energy that you give out to the rest of the world. That expense we are talking about. Don't evaluate everything in terms of cash and gold or cyber currency nowadays. Last one, the 11th house. The 12th, the Bhavat Bhavam of the 12th house, which is a moksha house or renunciation. Moksha means renunciation, which is also the apoklima house, expenses again. Why expenses? Why is renunciation considered as an expense? Because you have to give to the rest of the world. The energy is going from you to the rest of the world. That's the 12th house. The Bhavat Bhavam of the 12th house will become the 12th place from itself, which is 11th house. The Upachya house, which grows with time. Your wisdom grows with time. So is the Bhavat Bhavam of the 6th house. Bhavat Bhavam of the 6th house being 6th place from the 6th house, which becomes 11th house again. So what are the 6th and the 12th houses? 6th house is working for self, you working daily routines, your career, your work, your job, your business, your shop. Everything is the 6th house, your daily work. Which again is Upachya house, grows with time. So is the 11th house, that's why that also grows with time. Your wealth grows with time because you're working every single day for the entire life. So your efforts for yourself, apoklima, expenses, the energy that you expend, and the energy that you expend for others, the 12th house, in spiritual ways, whatever you're giving out as wisdom to anybody, including your own children even, including your own family and friends. All of that contributes to the overall wealth. So can this be summarized as? The gains and true wealth come through time, Upachya house. As efforts and expenses are made by self for others. We are talking about effort of self versus effort of others. Effort for others. So gains and true wealth come through time as efforts and expenses are made by self for others with detachment, 12th house, as a service. This is the essence of service. Or this particular 11th house gives the essence of service and essence of wealth. The true wealth earned is that. The true wealth earned is not your bank balance. It is earned wisdom of the soul. Because we are speaking in this whole series about the higher self. This will give a true picture of what the higher self is like and what we are looking for in life, really speaking.